Coming up on the season premiere of That Was a Show, Vinnie and Bobby was a show. Buried deep within the filthy bowels of Married with Children was a backdoor pilot for a show called Top of the Heap, starring Matt LeBlanc. It lasted 7 episodes. But because everyone else was wrong, another attempt was made featuring the same character, Vinnie Verducci, and thus Vinnie and Bobby was born. It also lasted 7 episodes. Brynn, Aaron, and Barry attempt to piece this all together, and while they're at it, they pick apart the latest major act of 90s nostalgia about that obscure show where Matt LeBlanc really took off. The Friends Reunion! Welcome back to Season 2 of That Was a Show. Cold open. We grew up during peak sitcom. Seinfeld, Friends, The Fresh Prince. But those shows were diamonds in the rough. This podcast is not about those diamonds. It's about the rough. Some sitcoms were briefly popular in their time. Some were canceled almost immediately. You probably won't recognize most of these, and you'll ask, that was a show?
That was a show?
The podcast about failed or forgotten sitcoms from the 80s and 90s, starring
Brynn Burney,
Aaron Yeager,
and Andrew Helmer as Barry.
A Radio Gizmo production. Guys, we're back. It's season 2. We got renewed for another season.
Oh, man, I can't believe the network picked us up. All right. It's nice to know that we could go a whole 11 and a half seconds before we hit a lull in our first record.
I mean, we're rusty. We took a bit of a break. We took like a hiatus like they do when they're, filming a season. Like, we had a few weeks off. So, we're just getting right back into it. But,
I moved.
Yeah.
My whole life feels so different from last time we talked.
You're in a new little home studio. So it's a whole new thing. And but I'm really excited. I'm happy to be sitting here with both of you. This is going to be a fun show.
This will be a fun one to talk about.
Yeah.
I'm really excited that we get to start off season 2 and I get to say, wow, I have a new least favorite show we've covered. It's Vinnie and Bobby. I hate it.
Yeah, it's weird. But it was fun doing it, and it's fun seeing like hot young Matt LeBlanc. So.
And doesn't your life feel deeper and richer for having seen this show?
Yeah.
Yes,
definitely. I do feel like it fills in a missing puzzle piece in my comprehension of how sitcoms were produced in the early 90s. Like, I do feel like there's a data point here from the fact that this show was made.
Yeah, I agree. Like, clearly, it's like they have this star in the making, or at least they really want this guy to hit big, and they're just like, okay, let's throw him at something else, see if it sticks. I wish, I just think of how hard John Mulaney's sitcom crashed like a decade ago. I just, it's such a shame to think that they're not still doing that, because that man deserves to be a star. And just to see that show crash and burn and then be like, never again.
Yeah, it feels like in the early 90s, if they deemed someone like a probable star, they would just keep going up to bat. Yeah. No matter how many times it took to find a show that worked.
Well, that was like Jennifer Aniston.
We Jennifer
saw
Aniston.
That, with her multiple failed pilots.
Yeah. So speaking of which, I guess we should go into a description of what we're talking about today.
Yeah, let's do this.
A little bit of context here. So welcome everyone to season 2 of That Was a Show. Still in COVID pandemic lockdown. But the three of us got our first dose of vaccine, so things are starting to look up.
Woohoo!
Yes, I feel some power flowing through my veins.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about Vinnie and Bobby.
Oh, God.
Let's do this.
All right.
Yeah, let's.
Amidst its smash success, the creators of Married with Children famously, or perhaps infamously, squeezed not one but 3 backdoor pilots for attempted spin-offs into the show. 2 of the 3 never made it past the pilot, but 1 actually did. Matt LeBlanc had what people in the industry call it, and his guest appearance as Kelly Bundy's boyfriend, Vinnie Verducci, became a show called Top of the Heap, which lasted only 7 episodes. Yet, there must have been this instinct that Matt LeBlanc, being both very handsome and very talented, needed a show, and that show, for some reason, needed to feature the character Vinnie Verducci. So, Top of the Heap was retooled into another swing at a spin-off, retaining that character but changing just about everything else. The result was Vinnie and Bobby, which is best described as, what if testosterone got its own show? Vinnie, played by Matt LeBlanc, lives in a cheap apartment in Chicago. His childhood buddy Bobby, played by Robert Torti, has been freeloading at his place since his dad and cat, both of whom were featured in Top of the Heap, are no longer there. 17-year-old Mona, played by Joey Lauren Adams, lives across the hall. She has a schoolgirl crush on Vinnie, and he must constantly fend her off, lest he be tempted to commit a felony. That's not me editorializing. That's just paraphrasing from the actual dialogue. In the pilot, Bobby got Vinnie a job working construction. Bobby wants to become Vinnie's permanent roommate, but Vinnie struggles to convince Bobby that this will entail actually paying rent. If he doesn't start to pay, Vinnie will have no choice but to kick him out and let fellow construction worker William Melvin Belly, played by John Panette, move in instead. Apart from that, they both admire their own physiques a lot and flirt with women. End premise.
Yeah, I mean, there's not much to it. And I have to say right off the bat, we only watched the pilot for this episode because, frankly, I guess we didn't really care enough. But...
That's all I had in me.
Yeah.
Like, I was so out so quickly. Like, it's just so... The fact that the main character, that like one of the admirable qualities to the character built into the script is, wow, look at him not committing statutory rape. Good for him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, even the dialogue is just so problematic. Like, it's just so, yeah. And then when Bobby comes into play and he there's a moment where he he tries to kiss her with his mouth open.
Yeah.
He
tries to swallow her whole.
Yeah. Tries to eat her face.
It's really, really gross. And I don't think anyone's buying Joey Lauren Adams as being 17.
No, it's worth noting she was like about 24, I think, when they shot this, and
that does make me feel better.
And she looks 24, and there's no reason to have her play a 17-year-old apart from the fact that they apparently wanted that to be an ongoing premise.
Well, you can see there, and that's where you can see the Married with Children in them coming out, where they just thought it was edgy for the sake of edgy at that point.
Yeah.
It was basically like another Kelly Bundy, essentially, an overly sexualized blonde
that's
teenager.
One of my notes. Is Mona a surrogate for Kelly Bundy?
I think so.
It was interesting to see the jump from the Top of the Heap credits where... I like how I'm like, I've seen the show, where like, you know, her style of dress and Top of the Heap, very Lolita, very like really playing up it. But by the time they get to Vinnie and Bobby, like she's just dressed like Kelly Bundy.
Yeah, totally. And didn't Vinnie actually date Kelly Bundy? Yeah, he was Kelly Bundy's boyfriend in Married with Children.
Yeah.
So it's like, I don't know. It's all very weird. And like, they could have dressed her a certain way to make her look younger. But no, she just looked like your typical 20-something. And really, it took me a long time to actually figure out that she was supposed to be a teenager until I heard the dialogue.
Yeah, but it's in every description of the show. It's explicitly described as like, she's this 17-year-old and he has to like fend off these advances from her. And it's like...
How much?
Like, what show that?
She gives him a calendar of her that is like professionally produced, like sexualized shots of her. And I was like, A, how did she pay for this? B, who shot these?
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
There's a lot of questions.
There's too many questions, really, to, that they could fill their own episode, truly.
Mhm.
Like, it's just your typical, like, hyper-sexualizing of a teenager. And there's nothing wrong with a teenager. To be clear, there's nothing wrong with a teenager having a crush on an older person. That's normal. What is not normal is the whole plot being about her trying to sleep with him and him fending her off. But really, there's this subtext that when she's 18, it's on,
Now, I'm going to propose a theory here. Obviously, I'm not in the head of the people who wrote this concept.
Yeah.
But there seems to be a trope, especially in that era, where there's like a guy who is handsome or perceived to be like dripping with sexuality. And it's almost like there's this fantasy. I don't know if it's a fantasy in the heads of the male writers that they would be in a position to be like fending off advances from attractive women. Like the idea is that like attractive women are always throwing themselves at this guy and he has to be the one to like be turning them down. So it's like as if one person said, well, there's this woman who's always hitting on him and he's turning her down. And someone else is like, but why would he turn her down? If she's attractive, he would just sleep with her. And someone else is like, well, okay, I guess we need a reason why he would be turning her down.
What, is she unattractive or something?
Yeah.
No, she's very attractive.
No,
she's
very
on
attractive.
television.
So she's on television.
Yeah.
So what if she's 17? So it almost feels like they threw that in as the reason for him to not sleep with her.
And this was like a main thing in Married with Children as well. There were always like
creepy men. Yeah.
Well, yeah, but there was like inexplicably attractive young women throwing themselves at Al Bundy.
Yes, exactly.
And it made no sense. And it was so stupid. And it's like his excuse was that he was married.
That's exactly my point. Yes.
But it was complete nonsense. Because there was no way that any of it would even happen, right?
Yes, you're totally right.
So you see where this mindset is of these writers. Like they have this like weird fantasy. And they're like, oh, okay, we want to do that again, but we have to do a bit of a twist on it.
Yeah.
They're like, oh, we got to make the guys handsome, so at least it sort of makes sense. But then why are they not sleeping together? Oh, because it's illegal.
Yeah, that's exactly the theory I was getting at, which is that with Al Bundy, it's because he was married, but they needed a reason for Vinny, and because he's single, okay, what could the reason possibly be? Okay, because she's 17.
Ugh.
Very strange opening titles, starting them off as little kids who are friends. And it's like, okay, I get it. You're establishing them as childhood friends. But then it jumps straight through time from childhood friends to posing next to motorcycles and fancy cars hitting on women. Like literally, it jumps from like they're 8 years old to they're in their 20s. And pretending that they're rich. Like there's no aging in between. There's no growing up together.
I felt really stupid because when the credits came on, I went, wait, when was this made? And I was thinking we were watching, like I hadn't really done any research. And I briefly was like, wait, how young is Matt LeBlanc in this? Is he like a kid? and then we got halfway through the credits and I was like, oh God. I was like, I better keep this one to myself, but
you didn't.
No, I didn't.
The first thing I noticed about this show is that the dialogue is very on the nose, and
very
that little joke of like establishing that he just landed a gig working construction by saying something about how he's like going to be good at it, but then he like puts a hammer through a wall, and I'm like, okay, so you got a job working construction and for some reason you're hammering the wall of your own apartment with like, what?
Yeah, it was dumb.
He was just putting a nail in the wall. That was
for
it.
What reason though?
I can't help you there. I can't. Yeah, all the dialogue was so bad, except for there's one great joke. Just one great joke in the entire pilot.
Go for it.
Go on.
It was towards the end, like one of the annoying things is that Bobby has invited all these people over and all they want to do is watch TV, and they do a nice little subversion where they don't want to watch sports, they all want to watch 90210 with Joey Lauren Adams.
That was funny.
And Joey Lauren Adams says, like, man, can you think of anything else that could bring together, like, the divide between construction workers and teenagers other than the lives of rich, snobby white people? And then Matt LeBlanc goes, yeah, really really makes the homeless problem seem small. And like he's like so annoyed with them, and it's like, I was like, wow, how did that sneak in there?
Yeah, it was like a weirdly smart joke that was out of place.
It was smart, and it was almost like a save the cat moment for Vinny as well, because I'm like, oh, he's the one person in this room that isn't.
Vinny's
like,
okay.
Yeah, he's okay.
He's consistently
fine.
He's consistent. Like Vinny is made so much better by being next to Bobby the whole time.
Yes.
That, like,
Bobby's the worst.
I hate Bobby so much.
Yeah,
like so much. He might be my least favorite like sitcom character we've encountered.
Even though he's supposed to be a sleazebag, it's so much so that it crosses the threshold far beyond any potential for being funny, and just like, I can't watch this.
What I don't
it's
understand,
like Joey and Joeyer.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
I don't. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like he's like the worst, slightly worse version of Vinny.
Yeah.
Like, what I don't understand is he's the one working, like, at the start of this. Like, Bobby already has a job working construction, and he brings Vinny in. Why is he not paying rent if he has a full-time job? Like,
yeah, he's the one who has a job at the start.
Like, why is he freeloading?
Well, because that's his character. They say that he's a freeloader, so apparently that's it.
But wouldn't it be the other way around, that he would be like, you know what I mean? Like,
they give absolutely every positive quality to Vinny.
Yeah.
And all the negative qualities go to Bobby.
It feels like they wrote it the opposite way around, and then they did some weird switcheroo with it. It feels like they probably wrote it at the start that Vinny hooks Bobby up with the job instead of the way it plays out.
Well, I think what they were trying to go for is that...
It's confusing. It's very weird and confusing.
So that apartment was...
Vinny's dad.
Dad's apartment.
Yeah.
Yes.
So it was Vinny's dad's apartment. Vinny's dad is gone. The cat is gone. So I think
I wish the cat were there. Why couldn't they just leave the cat?
But I think the implication is that my guess is that Bobby thinks by getting Vinny a job, that's the favor he's doing in exchange for getting to live in this apartment.
Okay, maybe, yeah. I guess.
That makes more sense than the script ever bothers to make.
I know. I did like the 90210 bit. That was very funny. And I think it was just an ad for 90210, because 90210 aired on Fox.
I was going to ask this. So I feel like this might be a weird deja vu thing, but I feel like we might have debated this once in an earlier episode of our podcast. And it might have been about 90210. I don't know for sure.
It's a bit of synergy. It is, but it works because like 90210 was that big.
It was a huge show back then.
But my question is, do you think this was like a cross-promotion thing that the network requested, or something that the writers of this show did just because it was trendy, and because it's a show on Fox, they can talk about it without dealing with any copyright issues?
I think
it's both. They did a lot of cross promotion on Fox, I think.
Yeah, until the Simpsons came in and just started ripping on Fox all the time.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think it was cross promotion. I think they liked to be meta and silly about it on that network. It was kind of a weird network, like,
because while it was the smartest scene in the episode, probably, I did find it weird that they made such a meal out of the characters gathering to watch 90210 to the point where it crossed over the commercial break.
Yeah.
But it's a good, I mean, it is a good bit of subversion, and like Seinfeld does it too.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
Seinfeld makes the exact same joke by having them all be obsessed with Melrose Place.
Well, they turned an entire episode into that.
Yeah, that's funny.
And I like both of them in that, like, I like when TV remembers that people watch TV.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
True.
You know, it's a fun little bit of meta, you know.
By the way, the thing in the opening titles where they're posing next to fancy cars to make it like women think that it's their car.
Yeah.
Didn't that happen with Joey in an episode of Friends?
It was Ross.
Totally.
I think it was Ross.
I thought it was Joey. Maybe
No, I think
I'm
it's
wrong.
Ross with a sports car. Or maybe it is. No,
I thought
it's
it was
Joey.
Joey.
It's Joey. It's Joey.
I think it was accidentally at first, and then when he realized that it was having this effect, he like maintains pretending that this expensive car is his car for the duration of the episode.
I want to say a Porsche, and it's always parked outside of probably Central Perk. And then he goes even further and he starts buying like Porsche like a
jacket or something or a hat.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
So I'm just wondering if they pulled that idea from this show, or
Probably
if
not.
or if he supplied that. Like, hey, there was this funny gag we did in hey, this would be funny in Friends, or anyway, I don't know.
I don't know.
There's a certain innocence to the simplicity of TV in this era, but at the same time, a certain sleaziness because no joke is off base. So somehow this show is both innocent and vulgar at the same time.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Totally.
I found it just dripping with sleaze at all times.
I mean, it's also on Fox. Like that it's on the
Fox.
nature of the network. It was a little bit of a crass network, and which is funny because when we say Fox, we obviously do not mean Fox News or like the cable Fox. We mean like Fox as in the,
Fox
technically the same
true.
company, but
it's just, it's weird that that exists. That
it is.
Anyway,
the audience seems to really cheer hard for the sexuality of Vinnie and Bobby.
I was going to say, I think it's played up. I think that they overdid it with the woos. Like it was very woo heavy. It was very like woo every time they like showed their muscles or like
it was. Yeah, the audience was very directed clearly on how to react.
Time.
I think it's interesting in that I almost think it was almost like a weird little like counterpart to they do the exact same thing with Kelly Bundy on Married with Children. I mean, anytime Kelly Bundy does everything, the audience is obviously supposed to react, howling and howling. And I think it was interesting to see them do exactly that with men.
Yeah.
Because this is the most sexualized. This is now more than Chachi.
Oh, yeah.
This is
even more than Chachi.
Yeah.
It's true. And like Bobby had that terrible mullet. It was really bad.
And if it had just been with Vinnie, if it had just been with Matt LeBlanc, that could have I feel like they could have gotten away with that as, isn't this an interesting flip on you're used to us doing this with women and now we're doing it with men and he's the one who's hypersexualized. And I feel like there could have been legs to that premise.
Yeah.
Didn't you feel like
but not with Bobby.
Anytime they did it for like Robert Torti, who plays Bobby, anytime they did it for him, I was like, are they making fun of him? Like I just kept getting that vibe where it was like, I think you're cool, Homer Simpson. Sandra, that was mean.
I think for 1992, he was hot. I think that it's just hard for us to look past that mullet.
He was. But like, Matt LeBlanc is
classically,
in every
handsome.
there's a moment where they're debating like who has better hair, and I'm like, you fucking idiot.
There's no debate here.
It was really weird.
Well, they had the scene at the construction site where the client, the older woman there is like suddenly finding herself very attracted to Vinnie.
She's
Bobby,
like 35. She's like 35.
Well, I assumed that they were implied to be
yes, they were
significantly older than him, even if in actuality the actors aren't.
Those
I don't know.
Pieces of meat.
Yeah. But,
they literally said that. I
well,
think.
she calls him a beefcake.
Beefcake.
And then Bobby comes running in and claims that no, she was like looking at me, and it's like, dude, no.
Yeah.
Because you're just
sad.
like, no, we were all looking at Matt LeBlanc, you fool.
It's weird because going back to the woos, it sounds like they were trying to get lots of young women in the audience to like hoot and holler, right? But no young women would watch this show. Like, this is not something that appeals. Like, at least back in the day with Joni Loves Chachi, it would appeal to young women because it's kind of like about pop music or whatever. But like, this is not Yeah, this is just
I think it's an attempt to capitalize on a female audience without realizing that they should be writing for a female.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. It's a very masculine show with characters that they hope there will be like a female gaze toward these characters, but without putting any thought into any other aspect of the show that would need to be aligned with that.
Should we talk about Bill? Poor Bill.
Oh
man.
It's
Bill,
the Uncle Beano effect once again.
I didn't know his last name was Belly until you said it.
Yeah.
And I was like, are
Bill
you
Belly.
kidding
Now,
me?
I will say I got super excited when I saw John Panette because I like him.
Sure.
He's great. He's a fantastic character actor.
And
They did nothing. Nothing.
Yeah. and I feel like it is worth mentioning that was actually his stand-up shtick, is that he would make fun of himself eating a lot. Like that was a thing that he would do as a comedian. But still, I made a note of this where I'm like, I get that that's like his shtick, but they could have given him so much more.
He's a funny guy.
He's a funny guy. He's a good performer. He has a really good on-screen energy. His face is like emotive in the right way. And like they could have given him something so much more.
Yeah. So, for the audience out there, so John Panette, you might remember most probably from the series finale of Seinfeld. He's the gentleman that the gang watches get mugged, and then they, go to jail for it. Spoilers for anybody out there who hasn't finished Seinfeld. But in this one, it's just all they're doing is making fat jokes and shaming him for eating. And like every now and then there's elements to it where I'm like, there's this sliver of positivity in it that I feel like there's a version of this that works because he's very confident in who he is.
Yes.
And I kind of like that.
He's confident and joyful and self-assured, and that's
he thinks
great.
everybody else is stupid. And I kind of like that.
And
but then I'm like, it's still it's still
like,
on him.
It was a good contrast to cast him alongside those other two bimbos, basically himbos rather. And if he were like the smart, self-assured one, and these two are kind of like
the
bumbling.
numbskulls.
Yeah, they're kind of numbskulls. They're kind of himbos. They're superficial and like, insecure, right? It's a good contrast, but his whole thing is very one-dimensional and all based around talking about what he's eating and like,
and they never body shame him, which is interesting.
Yeah.
Right.
I expected the show to be worse. I don't mean the show doesn't. The show does it constantly.
Yeah,
the show does it. Yes.
Vinnie and Bobby don't.
So, yeah, it's weird. The whole thing is really weird and problematic and just plays into that terrible trope from the time, which is like, oh, it's a bigger bodied person.
Yeah.
Okay, this is like...
And again,
it's really starting to reach like, he's looking around the apartment. He's like, oh, you only got one kitchen? And you're like, come on.
It's just a stupid joke. It's not even a good joke.
We're not exaggerating when we say every line of dialogue he has is about food. And it's not like he only has one scene. He is a prominent character in this show.
Yeah.
He's in many scenes.
Yeah.
He's the closest thing outside of Vinnie, Bobby, Joey, Lauren Adams. He is the biggest character.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's a major supporting role in this show. He's in several scenes. He has many lines. They gave him lots of dialogue.
He almost became Vinnie's new roommate.
Yeah. Now that was an okay scene, and I kind of got a glimmer of what they could have done with that character, because the way he like comes in so confident and like, I hear you're looking for a roommate. I can give you a check right now. First and last month's rent, security deposit. He's so friendly and just like so warm. And there's something about him where I'm like, that's a better show. Get rid of Bobby.
Get rid of fucking Bobby. Vinnie.
Yeah.
It's all about Vinnie and Bill.
Vinnie and Bill as roommates.
Vinnie and Billy.
Give Bill.
That would have been a great show.
Get rid of all the fat shaming and the jokes about food, and just Vinnie and Bill as roommates.
A better show.
A better show. Not great.
Yeah,
Let's not
great.
go too far with it.
But there's something there. There's something you can work with there.
Yeah. Yeah.
I feel like I don't have a lot to say on this, but I'll just sort of add, I just feel, do I just always love seeing Joey Lauren Adams, and man, does it always disappoint me that I don't get to see more of her in general, just because like she has such a great energy to her in
I agree.
every role that she's in. Like it just made me, as soon as she was on screen, I was like, oh, I haven't seen Joey Lauren Adams in so long. And it just reminds me that she lights up every scene she's in everything.
I did find Matt LeBlanc's appeal is somewhat evident. Like it shines through in this show a little bit.
Instantly.
Yeah, we can see why a lot of people thought this guy needs a show.
It's the same with Jennifer Aniston and muddling through. Like you just see it.
You see that.
You see the star power, if you will.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
His star power manages to shine through this dirtbag show. And and when I say dirtbag, here's what I wrote down. I'm like, what if this was the actual premise? Watch these sleazy dirtbags try to maintain a friendship and become roommates, I guess.
Yeah, that's about it.
It knows what it is, I guess.
That was a show?
We'll be right back after these messages. After these messages, we'll be right back. Hello, wonderful listeners and fans of this podcast. We want to hear from you. Go to anchor.fm/thatwasashow and leave us a voice message, and we might play it in a future episode. Or email us at thatwasashow@aol.com, our 90s era email address, and we might read your message. Our lines are open, so call right now. So, did you guys watch the top of the Heap titles?
Yeah, we did the opening titles. Sure.
This got to be the least we've ever done for something.
Well, we aren't covering Top of the Heap, but we had to look at it a little bit.
Yes. So, as we introduced at the beginning of the episode, the previous swing at a spin-off from Married with Children featuring the character Vinnie Verducci was the show Top of the Heap. So we all watched the opening title sequence, opening credits for Top of the Heap. First of all, I can't believe they licensed Putting on the Ritz for that.
Right.
That's weird and amazing. And my first reaction was like, is this guy a knockoff of Al Bundy? But then I did a little bit of research, and here's the actual context. Apparently in the backdoor pilot within Married with Children, I actually have to confess that I haven't watched it. But so the premise for Top of the Heap is that Charlie, who is a friend of Al on Married with Children, has a son named Vinnie. So Kelly Bundy starts dating this guy, Vinnie. Al doesn't realize that Kelly is dating his buddy's son. And that's sort of the premise for that episode. And I did see one scene of that episode, and it's admittedly a kind of funny scene. But Charlie is sort of like a more Al version of Al. Charlie is to Al Bundy what Bobby is to Vinnie in Vinnie and Bobby.
He's like a sleazier version of Al Bundy. Okay.
He's the sleazier, poorer man's version of Al Bundy.
Ugh.
Pulling schemes and scams and stuff like that, and is kind of some sort of sleazeball buddy of Al's. And he has this really handsome ladies' man son named Vinnie, and Al is like bragging about how, good looking his son is and how successful he is with the ladies, until he finds out that he's dating Kelly, and then he tries to strangle him basically. But
that sounds about right.
Yeah. But which is actually kind of a funny scene, but somehow they I don't know, to spin that into a whole series, what it is Charlie and his son Vinnie are living together in a Chicago apartment with a cat. And they have this thing called the Verducci Master Plan, which comes up in dialogue in both the Married with Children backdoor pilot and throughout the 7 episodes of Top of the Heap, where they keep making reference to the Verducci Master Plan, which is they're both poor, and Charlie's plan is that they will both get rich through the means of his son Vinnie marrying into a wealthy family. So in order to pull that off,
it's not bad.
That's like a real Frank Reynolds plan.
Yeah, it is.
Yes,
Yeah.
it's
like
real.
It's Always Sunny.
It's a real Frank Reynolds plan.
Yeah.
It is very It's Always Sunny. That's true. So to pull that off, they need to come across as if they're members of high society, so that people in high society will think that they fit in. So that's
hence the putting on the Ritz.
And
okay.
top of the Heap.
Top of the Heap, the putting on the Ritz song, the limos
right.
and the tuxedos and all of that we see in the opening credits. None of which makes any sense unless you actually research what the premise of this is.
I like how their cat is one of those really fluffy white cats that rich people are definitely coded for rich people.
Yeah.
You know, it's usually what a prissy, rich, waspy lady has is one of those really fluffy white cats.
Those cats have to be really hard to keep clean.
Yeah.
Probably. And spoiler alert, to try to fit into high society, a country club is involved.
Of course.
Of course.
Of course it is. I don't know. I don't actually think that's a bad premise. I actually like that better than like Vinnie and Bobby.
Yeah, because there is barely a premise to Vinnie and Bobby.
Yeah. So it's weird. It's really weird though when you hear about a retool that's that drastic. It's like a retool into a complete new show.
Yeah, and a complete new show with a much thinner premise. So it's almost like a detool.
detool. I like it.
And they're using the same sets, which I love.
Yeah.
I know. Oh my gosh. I never thought of that.
So they recycle the apartment, but they clean it up a little bit, I think. And then the cat is gone. The dad is gone.
Like the best part, the cat. Like leave the cat.
Yeah. And I think it looks like they've somehow, they've aged up Joey Adams. Because she seems like they're trying to make her even younger in the Top of the Heap shit.
Yeah, it's funny.
But apparently in that show, the part of the plot involving her was the same. That she is this underage girl who is making advances toward Vinnie, and he has to fend them off.
Yeah.
It's funny because, like, that's their whole premise for that character in general, but it's like clearly there's not a lot of legs in that. Like when their first scene is like her being like, my 18th birthday is in like 2 or 3 months. Like were they really thinking this through? Like that was they were like, yeah, we're not getting in 9 episodes. Don't worry.
Yeah. And like, no, but the thing is too, when you take out that context and you just see her hanging out with them in the apartment, she just seems like a peer. Like she doesn't seem like that much younger than them. Yeah, like it's a very bizarre thing.
Their relationship is outside of her, you know, wanting him so badly. Like they get along well, and like you buy them as friends, and like like that part is all fine.
Yeah,
but you know,
I don't know. It's weird, but yeah, I mean, I guess I see like they just were really desperate to spin off some sort of vehicle for Matt LeBlanc. Because yes, he's a star and they were going to lose him to another network. But this was not the way.
No, this is not the way. So it's interesting to kind of get into is that like, I feel like we take spinoffs more seriously now than we did then, when really it was just backdoor pilots were such a common thing where they were like, it was an easy way to test an audience's reaction to a specific character, and it was an easy way to do it. And usually they were only written to be like, you know, like this was Matt LeBlanc wasn't really going to be in Married with Children. They wanted to see how that worked. Right.
Yeah, it's like they were testing the waters with him.
It was like a weird like screen test, like, you know, like almost like they were like, this guy's testing really well with the network. Let's throw him on Married with Children to see how he does.
It's I feel like it was very common.
They don't do that anymore.
And when they do, it's really jarring.
Mm-hmm.
In the few occasions where it does come up in recent years, it is very jarring. Like that whole thing with on The Office, the U.S. office, the farm.
Yeah, the farm.
Oh, yeah.
That thing is so weird to me. Like, I was so confused. I was like, are they going to do this? Like, they really did set it up as a backdoor pilot, and then it just went nowhere.
Well, so no, that's actually just the pilot for that show. That wasn't produced as an episode of The Office.
Yeah.
They separately produced an episode for something called The Farm.
Right.
And aired it in the final season when it wasn't getting picked. Well,
okay.
kind of to testing it a little, but also like by that point, it pretty much the ship had kind of already sailed on it.
Right.
But they had already shot a full pilot, which is why it shot differently than the rest of The Office. It shot like it's not. They really do
You're
cut down
right.
on the mockumentary stuff, but yeah, it was not.
But
that's
it
why
really
nobody
fit into that season of The Office because of the whole plot of his aunt dying and everything. Like it all fit in perfectly.
Yeah, that is as damn close to an organic way to do it.
Yeah, but it felt very weird and awkward. Whereas if you think about it now, in the 90s, they did it a lot. They really did.
A couple other little details you guys might appreciate. I'm just looking it up here. The cat was Mr. Fluffy.
Aw, Mr. Fluffy.
Mrs. Fluffy.
The other two attempts at backdoor pilots in Married with Children were Radio Free Tremaine and
I've heard of that one.
And Enemies. And Radio Free Tremaine involves this radio show, like a college radio show hosted by two friends of Bud Bundy when he goes off to college or something. And that episode involves a reunion between Marcy Darcy and her first husband in the show, Steve Rhodes.
Oh. On the subject of spin-offs, I'm going to just go ahead and do the spin-off segment. So we all know what Matt LeBlanc went on to do after this show. He obviously had a lot more success with Friends. And then, he did his spin-off of Friends, which was Joey and lots of other stuff. So Matt LeBlanc was just fine after Vinnie and Bobby. We also had Fred Stoller, who was one of the kind of supporting roles in Vinnie and Bobby. He's a super prolific character actor who has been in supporting roles in almost every television show imaginable. He did tons of TV and movies, still works today, and he's currently the voice of the character Mr. Salt on Close Enough, which is a show Aaron and I enjoy. Yeah.
I heard there's more of that coming out.
I think it's out now.
Oh, really? Oh, it's great.
And John Pinette, who we already talked about, who played Bill Belly, unfortunately is no longer with us. He passed away in 2014, but he continued to work a ton in TV and movies. And as we mentioned, he had his iconic role in the final episode of Seinfeld. Ron Taylor, who was also a supporting role in Vinnie and Bobby, was a very prolific character actor as well. And fun fact, he was the voice of Bleeding Gums Murphy, and he passed away in 2002. But, obviously got a lot of great work before then. And then Robert Torti, who plays Bobby, the titular Bobby in Vinnie and Bobby, he continued to work in TV quite a bit. He had reoccurring roles on shows like The Drew Carey Show, The Young and the Restless, and The Sweet Life of Zach and Cody. And then there's our girl, Joey Lauren Adams, who went on to star in several indie movies. She was kind of a darling back then of comedies. And then she was in a lot of bigger mainstream comedies like Biodome and Big Daddy. And she still works today. She's popping up in things left and right. And that's all I got.
Great.
Segment over.
So normally, right about now, I would do my segment 6 Degrees of Friends. But frankly, we all know how this show is connected to Friends. And this week, there was a bit of a, Friends revival and Friends revival of interest in Friends. Namely the Friends reunion. So for this episode, we decided to watch that Friends reunion. All 1 hour and 44 minutes of it.
Yeah, we did.
So now we're going to talk about it.
I'm kind of glad that this came up just because I'll be honest, I was curious, but I also, nothing would have driven me to watch it if we weren't doing this, so.
Yeah, I think so. I think, it was definitely one of those things I looked at it. I was like, an hour and 44 minutes? That's a lot.
It is a lot. And yeah, I feel the same way. I'm kind of glad we had this excuse to need to watch it because otherwise maybe I wouldn't have.
For the most part, I ended up liking it. I know I went on when we broached the idea a few days ago. I kind of went on a bit of a diatribe about how much I do not like reunion shows.
Yeah.
Most of the time, I could really give a shit. And this is definitely one of those times. But I thought, for the most part, the way they put it together made me give a shit a little bit more.
Yeah, I agree.
And that was mostly in the moments when it was just them on the stage together without James Corden. It really worked. It really worked. There was a real lack of artificiality to it that I really appreciated. They were genuine with each other. There was, the emotions were very, really there. And it was such a contrast to like when they would cut to the segments they did in front of an audience with James Corden. Because I was like, well, this is fake.
Yeah. That was really weird. And when I saw that they had done that, I rolled my eyes hard because I'm not a big fan of James Corden. Sorry to everybody who is, but I just was like, no, I'm not interested in this. And I just felt it was going to be so schlocky and cheesy. And the good thing about it is that they cut back and forth. They didn't have it all in one big chunk. It wasn't a thing that I had to sit through.
I bet you that Corden interview lasted hours, and maybe and maybe 10 minutes of it ended up in the special.
I couldn't agree more. I went into it with the same kind of lower expectations. I'm like an hour and 44 minutes. The thing about James Corden, I'm pretty neutral on James Corden, but it seemed like a very random choice. My reaction was what does James Corden have to do with this sitcom from the late 90s? It just seemed like a completely, I get that he's a big pop culture force and interviews a lot of celebrities today. Yeah. But there are a lot of people who do that. And it just seemed very arbitrary.
There had to have been a better host. Right? We were trying to think about who would be better, and I can't really think of one. But there had to be somebody who had a little bit more relevance to this. Maybe he's a really well-known, massive Friends fan.
Maybe.
Right?
I don't know.
Maybe that's how he got
But
tapped.
if that's the case, he should have said that.
Right?
Well, again, I think whatever they did that night really wasn't working because there's not a lot of it in the special.
No, it's true. It's only snippets. I was glad that they had Janice come out, Maggie Wheeler. I was glad that they had her pop in. Yeah. And then they had that weird little cameo from Gunther.
Because he couldn't fly, I think was why.
Okay. And then they had Christina Pickles and Elliot Gould in the audience. Mm-hmm. That was cute. They did some cute little things. I could have done without that weird fashion show. That was pretty lame.
The one thing I liked that they, they had Cara Delevingne, and then they did Cindy Crawford, and then I guess Justin Bieber. Yeah. But then they had Cara Delevingne again, and I was like, well, what? Why didn't you just get a fourth person?
Yeah, I don't know.
Did you make the audience stop while Cara Delevingne did a really intense costume change?
Yeah, I think so. It feels like the whole thing was engineered to appeal to the younger fans of Friends. The new generation of fans.
That's what it is. That's the James Corden connection.
That's the James Corden. That's the Cara Delevingne.
It's the carpool karaoke thing, and the whole he's very popular probably with the new generation of millennial Friends fans.
I guess,
millennials and Gen Zs. They love Cara Delevingne. They love Justin Bieber. They, and that's why Cindy Crawford got a weirdly
tepid response.
Yeah. I was like, shouldn't this get a bigger response?
Yeah, they got Cindy Crawford for this? Yeah, how come the crowd isn't going wild?
If they said, this is Kaya Gerber's mom, then they would have gotten a bigger response. Because Kaya...
I don't know. Yeah. I don't know what that is.
Kaya Gerber's her daughter, who's a model now, and is in that whole realm of the, the Kendall Jenner and the fucking... Hailey Bieber and all those people. She's part of that generation.
The bulk of the show, the bulk of the reunion was not in front of that big live audience with cheering people and James Corden. The bulk of the show took place on the original soundstage where Friends was shot. Yeah. They reconstructed the set. The actors arrived one at a time. They took a nice sort of long period to just ease them into the environment and kind of follow them documentary style while they took in the set.
They had a full documentary crew.
Full documentary
crew. Very well done.
And I have to admit, like, I would be lying if I said that I didn't really enjoy that. I did
too.
It was charming. It was nice to see them get back together and reminisce. And like you were saying, it seemed very sincere. It seemed like we were getting their actual emotional reactions to kind of revisiting this place that they essentially lived in for a decade.
Yeah, I think that part of it, Aaron, is for us. That part of it is for, and not us, meaning like, you know, and it's weird because I feel like we come across as bigger Friends fans than we actually are. But like, it's for the pop culture people. That part was for both the real fans of Friends and the older fans of Friends and the pop culture lovers, right? And then that weird part with James Corden was for the new generation of fans. So it was like this weird mishmash. They probably, in planning it, they're like, how should we do this? And they had too many network notes. So they combined a bunch of different things together. Luckily, the final product was decent, but they felt like they had to cater to too many different audiences, too many segmented audiences. So they kind of like did this weird hybrid.
I think they covered their bases.
Yeah,
they weren't sure.
So.
They weren't sure what was going to play and what wasn't.
Yeah.
And in the editing room, they managed to cobble something together that played.
Yeah, and they actually did quite a good job of editing it. And the fact that it seemed like, well, an hour and 44 minutes, like red flag, this thing's going to really drag, but it really didn't. Like it moved quite well. It felt pretty well paced. Some of the segments, like the thing with the trivia, the way they broke up the trivia thing, that was really nice.
Yeah.
And
the trivia played so well.
The trivia played well.
Yes.
And the clips that they chose to show from Friends, and sometimes extending those clips into outtakes or behind the scenes moments, were pretty well selected. Like the pivot scene had me in stitches.
And also seeing like really long uncut like their shooting of it was really fun. Yeah, especially the pivot scene, like seeing how much they're laughing while they're doing it.
It was really fun.
It's one of the most relatable pieces of comedy that show's ever done because nobody's ever been able to move without quoting it since then.
Yeah, it's great.
It's funny. Whoever edited this special deserves her own special Emmy because it just, I don't know, it was really well done. Like they took a lot of different ideas and threw them together. And I'd love to like talk about the trivia game because I thought that was like really well done because they basically recreated that classic episode of Friends. Like they recreated that episode where they do the kind of newlywed game where it's the girls versus the guys, who knows each other better, where ultimately the girls lose their apartment and then they have to swap apartments. It's a whole thing. It was a very big episode. But
it's a great episode.
They did such a great job kind of recreating that idea, but for Friends trivia. And then they used it to like literally bring back side characters. Like that was so awesome. And they like it was really
the hand double thing. That was funny.
Yeah. Like they brought back the actual
the part
actor.
Where I realized that was Tom Lennon. I was like, I had no idea that was Thomas Lennon this whole time.
Yeah, it was really, really well done. And they brought in Tom Selleck and everything. Like it was really well done, and they had Schwimmer run it, just like Ross,
just like in the episode.
Yeah, and
oh my God, Schwimmer is so game in that. Like he is so on point that entire segment where you're like, wow, you're really selling this, man.
In fact, the whole way through this reunion, no one seemed more just down for it than Schwimmer. The whole time, if you looked at his face in any moment, he was just filled with joy the whole time. It
reminds you that especially in my later years when I don't care for Friends as much as I once did in the 90s, and I often, a lot of my things would be like Ross as a character really pisses me off. But then watching this, I was like, man, what a performer though. Like just what a great performer. And like realizing how much of even just disliking Ross, you were like, oh, right, because he's a good actor. Like,
yeah. I don't know. Well, but on the topic of like disliking Ross, like I think Ross gets an unfair, like he's problematic in that he's shitty at times to like Rachel and kind of like negs Rachel. But like, there's Aaron, you often talk about that article about how
there's a somewhat renowned article that draws a comparison between a lot of the problems with modern day America. Well, I'll say modern day North America because I'll include Canada in that. With an analogy involving Ross Geller and the way that Friends positions Ross Geller as, out of this group of friends, he's sort of the most mature. He's the one with the most impressive job. He's a scientist. Anytime he tries to bring up that he's a scientist, everyone just shits on him. And just the idea of like the inherent anti-intellectualism that's built into the show, and the way that anytime he shows like a glimmer of maturity, it has to be ripped apart. Like he just has to be derailed in any of his attempts to just try to to keep it together. And I can't remember every detail from the article, but it's worth the read if you can find it.
Beyond Schwimmer, the person I was most endeared to when watching this was actually Matt LeBlanc.
He's so adorable.
He was so sweet. He came across as like this like a lovely like suburban dad or something. Like, he was so sweet. He came on and he was so happy to be there. He was so kind and warm to everybody, and he was like wiping one of it was either like Courtney Cox or Jennifer Aniston. He was like wiping their tears at one point.
Yeah, he was like everyone's dad there. He really seemed like he was like the wise old parent to the rest of them for some reason.
I really like that moment where they're talking about it was just him and Aniston. I love just how many private moments the documentary crew managed to catch between them, like just the different pairings and stuff like that. But him and Aniston coming out of her dressing room, and like there's just this little innocent moment where she doesn't mean to say it. He was like, "Oh, it always feels so smaller," and she's like, "Well, yeah, but it's not, because like we didn't get any bigger." And then like there's an elephant in the room where you're like, "Yeah, Matt LeBlanc's put on a little weight," and she doesn't realize what she said, and he just has this really genuine moment where he's like, "Yeah, well, speak for yourself," and it's such a cute little like friend, like actual friend moment, and like, and then she's just like, "Shut up."
Pretty much everything of them on the set was quite endearing.
Yeah.
And there were also little nuggets of, I don't know if the word is trivia, but little sort of behind the scenes nuggets of the making of the show that came out in various ways that were actually kind of interesting. They did touch on muddling through.
Yeah.
They completely downplayed that whole thing, though.
Downplayed the details of how it went down.
They spun it in such a nice way. They were like, "Oh, we're just going to share her with this other show and see who wins." And like, but mind you, that was their perspective, right? That was like Marta Kaufman's perspective. They didn't talk about the weird executive shenanigans that went on to like steal her away from that show.
And we got to see a glimpse of LAX 2194.
Oh, wow.
We need to track that down.
Oh,
I don't
man.
think apparently it doesn't exist. It never went past pilot, I don't think. And
right.
But how do we get our hands on that pilot?
People from when I was doing a little Googling, so LAX 2194 was the pilot Matthew Perry was on, that basically he was booked for the series. When they wanted to cast him for Friends, they couldn't do it. People seem to be kind of learning about it this week. So I don't think any of that footage ever really leaked
saw the light of day.
This week.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
somebody's got to find it. We have to like watch it because it looks so bad.
Because it almost is as if they deliberately kept that a secret, and now this was
like
the first hush, and this was the first reveal. Yeah. Also, in a similar way, we learn about how Jennifer Aniston and David Schwimmer legitimately had crushes on each other in the first season of Friends, and almost had a real life romance that just didn't quite happen.
It was pretty sweet.
It was cute.
I do wonder. It seemed like, again, not being a Friends aficionado, I guess this was new knowledge for the general public.
I guess it was. But you can see it in the show. Like there is that tension there. There is that chemistry, that like longing, as somebody put it. And there was an article I read, like just like about this reunion, or as an interview with Marta Kaufman and David Crane. It's like the longing really came through, and it was kind of like an open secret, or not a secret because no one knew for sure, but everyone speculated. Like everyone on set
all the cast
speculated.
were like, no, we knew.
We knew, but we didn't know. We knew, but like there was no confirmation.
Yeah. But the will they or won't they between those characters
really did exist.
Is legendary, and
Yeah.
it probably did work better than on a lot of other sitcoms
interesting.
because of the genuine chemistry they had.
Yeah.
Revisiting their first kiss scene. It's a really good scene.
Yeah.
I always remember it as a very it's just such an unconventionally shot sitcom scene. Like they really go for some mood lighting in that scene, and like to this day, like I can always remember the full scene, like, you know, with the rain and all that, and it's a great scene. It was good to see them kind of play on that.
Yeah.
And then they're also, there's a segment in the, you know, the reunion where they do a couple of these where they do read throughs of the scenes.
Right.
And man, they're all just so good. They were
really well shot. I think it had a lot of the vibe that the Fresh Prince reunion had. It had like a lot of that like intimacy and that like important, well, not like important conversations like we're in the Fresh Prince, you know, but it had like that level of emotion and that level of
the on-set doc style scenes.
Yeah, it was like well produced in the same way, but then they had also on top of that weird audience bit. Yeah, should we talk about the overly dramatic musical cues?
Yeah, I could have done without the schmaltzy music.
Shit.
Yeah.
Most of them are fine, but when they're treating Matt LeBlanc pulling his arm out of his socket like it's the most dramatic thing in the world, and but the cast is laughing about it while you're talking about it.
Yeah.
It was shitty that happened, but they had like this dramatic music. Like
they turned a funny story into as if it was this big deal dramatic.
And then all the paramedics rushed in, and we had to stop shooting. And I'm like, well, then stop cutting back to the cast laughing.
The tone was like very off. And then they had like those segments where they were interviewing random people from around the world that are Friends fans, and it was
That was
interesting. It was a little awkward.
It was an interesting choice.
Yeah.
Well, it was a very, I don't know if I want to just full on say it, but it was a very interesting way to pretend that Friends was not very whitewashed and very heteronormative.
Yeah, it made it seem like, you're right. It's like, look, there are people of color and LGBTQ people who are fans of Friends. Like, it seemed very much like, look at this.
It was an odd choice.
Some of the fans aren't.
What an inclusive show this must have been. Yeah.
And they didn't even say anything about the Carol and Susan characters on the show. Like, they didn't say anything, and they didn't, like, maybe they couldn't get them as cameos, but they could have at least mentioned them or something, because, and you know, through a 2021 lens, there were many moments with that couple that weren't handled very well, and it was obviously through a very heteronormative lens. But the fact that there was a lesbian wedding shown and there was like, you know, representation of like gay women raising a child was actually a big deal back then.
Oh, absolutely.
So
it was mostly well handled. I mean, one of the creators is gay, and like that comes through, and like, it was just interesting not to see more.
It's interesting because in this article that I read that was interviewing Marta Kaufman and David Crane, he specifically says he actually wishes that the wedding scene was actually filmed more from their perspective, that they broke from their usual format and actually made it more about them instead of what was going on in the background. But back then, you know, they were so married to that idea, not to use married because it was about a wedding, but to that idea that it's about the six friends. So they said that, I think it was like David Crane that said that would be the one thing that they did differently, where they made it more of a like concerted effort to be about them. There's definitely like the whole phenomenon of Friends being liked so much by younger people is very confusing to me.
So I really wanted to talk about that. You know, like, I've been keyed up to talk about that.
It is very confusing. But I don't know. It's weird. Like, I get that people of our generation like it because it's part of nostalgia. It's part of our childhoods, right? But we can see it now and be like, hey, that wouldn't fly now.
Well, it's not even just about that. Like, if you look at it in the full scope of sitcoms and TV shows from its era, I don't think it's especially problematic as compared to other shows from the time.
You gotta read more about these. There's lots of problems.
I know what you mean. Like, I agree. I agree with Aaron in that, like, if you were going to stack it up against other popular shows from the 90s, the Friends actually does come off smelling like roses in comparison.
Right.
Like,
what I think is interesting is that the Friends reunion is being made in the context of Friends being a super popular show now. And it's really popular because a lot of younger audiences have rediscovered Friends, people who were not at all old enough in the 90s to have been watching it at the time. So it's not a nostalgia factor. It's new audiences today who have discovered Friends on Netflix in the last few years. And it's interesting to me that these younger audiences have gravitated so much toward Friends, but not other comparably successful, popular, critically acclaimed shows from the 90s. Like, the personal point of frustration for me is that when I talk to people in their 20s, all of them have seen Friends. None of them have watched a single episode of Seinfeld, and 3/4 of them have never watched The Simpsons.
Yeah, it's wild.
My analogy that I floated before was that it's almost like I have a comparison between the Beatles and the Eagles. The Eagles is technically one of the best-selling bands of all time. They've sold way more albums in America than the Beatles. And I've got nothing against the Eagles. They're fine. But the fact that they outsell the Beatles does bother me. And so it's a similar kind of thing where I'm like, Friends is fine. It's a good show. I enjoyed it a lot at the time. Haven't watched it much since.
I mean, there's a very simple reason for it. It has nothing to do with humor or anything. It's the same reason why The Office plays. It's serialized television. There are storylines. There are relationships to kind of dive into that.
That's true.
An audience, when binging it, can get into the character dynamics and keep watching it. Seinfeld, Simpsons, the shows that we love do not have any of that. Seinfeld has, some light plot in some of the later seasons, but no developments.
That's true.
Friends and The Office. The reason why they binge well is because they are continuing stories usually.
That's
interesting. It must be it.
That must be it.
It's like the same people who like relationship dramas in the CW shows.
Yeah.
They like the Friends and The Office.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's like, and Friends, even for its humor, for its whatever, Friends does that very well. Friends has some very good dramatic stuff in it that makes it an easy watch, right?
That's true. Those are all very good points. And it's true. The Office has romantic sort of will they or won't they subplots and things like that. Has that same emotional balance. Whereas something like Seinfeld, it was only funny. It didn't have those dramatic
no hugs,
moments, no hugs,
no lessons.
Yeah,
no learning,
no crying, no learning.
Yeah.
And it's the shows from that era that do have crying and do have learning that are the ones that people are gravitating toward now.
I mean, speaking of crying, there was so much crying in the reunion. Like, they were very emotionally, the main cast was very emotional when they got on that set. And it was kind of sweet, but the dramatic music, like, really, like, made it, like, I think a little, like, overwrought. And I got this feeling, and maybe this is kind of harsh, but, like, the way they were talking about the experience, like, it felt like a little cult-like. Like, it felt like they were very, like, in this, like, show together. Like, it felt, like, very, like, cloistered and, like, very, like, oh, nobody will understand. Nobody will understand our experience. It felt cult-like.
No, I disagree. I thought that was an interesting thing because what it was they were the biggest stars in America at that time, and they're right. Nobody else would understand exactly what they were going from. They're describing Beatlemania, essentially, from their perspective, right?
Right. where did the characters begin and the actors ended? Because there's like a lot of
exactly. I think that came up a lot.
Yeah, it seems like when they were back on that set, the way the actors were bringing up a new topic was in that character.
Mm-hmm.
Like Aniston was like reacting to everything like Rachel would react. And she was doing those like big hand gestures and things like Rachel would react, and Phoebe as well. Like Lisa Kudrow was becoming Phoebe on the set.
She had like reverted right back into character.
Yeah. I think it probably shows how much they evolved. Their characters evolved with them.
Yeah.
As that show went on. It's weird.
And because it was so sincere and the documentary moments kind of gave us that peek behind the curtain, we did really get to see that. I feel like a lot of the body language and physicality of those characters is just how these performers are in their most natural state.
I think it was interesting to see that. I think you could really see how much of an outsider Matthew Perry was.
Yeah, I felt that too.
It did sort of come through that Matthew Perry had to carry a lot of water in terms of actual jokes and laughs in the scenes. They talk about the casting process, and there's like this sort of line, it's almost treated as just this random aside, that the Chandler character was the one with actual jokes, and that initially they thought he'd be the easiest one to cast because he's the most like a comedian, the most traditionally sitcom-y character. But he turned out to be one of the hardest or the hardest one to cast. And they talk a little bit about how it was a character that would do actual jokes and one-liners and funny quips, but also have to be like a real three-dimensional person. And there was a moment in the kind of documentary style observations of their conversations and intimate moments where it comes through that Matthew Perry put a lot of pressure on himself to deliver and to perform, and that if he delivered a line that was supposed to be funny and the live studio audience did not crack up, he was devastated.
Yeah. Like,
and then they even talk about how like Lisa Kudrow's like, you never talked to us about that.
Yeah.
And you could see that he wasn't as close with them, and he kind of internalized it.
Right. Yeah. He must have internalized it. And that's a lot of pressure to put on yourself psychologically. And like, if you don't tell anyone, if you don't tell your acting partners that, and you don't express that you feel this weight on you, it's like, it's going to create that distance. And,
I think it's interesting. And I think the reason, and you could see it just from the writing, them not realizing it from the writer's standpoint, where they're like, oh yeah, he's the funny one. But like the way Matthew Perry plays that character, which is the reason why the character works so well, is because it's always from pain.
Yeah.
That character is that character is, he's depressed. And like he's in a lot of pain, and he has a lot of past trauma, and he has like he is always the one that's playing it from pain. And it's like a weird thing to see them not realize that when they were like, or to see that that's not on the page. They weren't thinking that.
That's true. It's almost as if his character was designed to be the tragic clown type of archetype, but they didn't know it for some reason.
Yeah, he wasn't designed. He was designed to be funny. And then Matthew Perry comes on and it's like, well, why is this guy funny? Because he hurts.
Yeah.
I think all of them sort of have weird takes on those characters that make them work. Joey works because no matter how like sleazy or whatever, or how outrageously dumb they make him, like he's got heart. So that, and all of that's in LeBlanc's performance, not on the page.
Yeah, you can tell he's just a sweet guy, and that's what's coming through. They talk about how Rachel was hard to cast because on the page, she was kind of this like self-centered, superficial person. And then they were like, well, Jennifer Aniston brought sincerity to it. She made her likable because she is like a sensitive and sincere person. So it's really interesting.
Yeah, or Kudrow talking about, and Lady Gaga, who...
how did we not bring that up? The Lady Gaga
but
scene.
Them talking, I like the references to people kind of appreciating Kudrow's take of like Phoebe being the different one, not having a better way to say it, but like people who felt a little different themselves usually relate to her, right? And that's
why I say I'm a Phoebe. I'm like, I'm an inexplicable cross between Monica and Phoebe. I've
Much more.
decided.
You're much more of a Phoebe.
I'm much more of a Phoebe, but I have Monica's neuroses and Monica's like bad luck and like insecurity. But then I'm also a Phoebe. Like,
And Brynn suggested, and I tend to agree, that I'm probably a Ross.
he's a Ross with Chandler.
A Ross with
Undertones.
touches of Chandler.
I think
And
I think I'm a Chandler with touches of Joey.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
would say that. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. That's funny.
I'm a bit of a big, dumb, lovable oaf. So I get it. Yes, to use, as the kids say, I found the Lady Gaga walk on so cringy.
Yeah, it was a
Also,
little cringy and
like,
weird.
I felt bad for Lisa Kudrow because I think she was like, the fuck is this?
Yeah, this is a lot. This is over
And then
top.
she
the
came
top.
on and I was like, I was kind of enjoying Lucy Kudrow singing that.
On her own, yeah.
Um,
Yeah, but it was kind of like that scene in the show where the much better singer was singing Smelly Cat with
Yeah,
her.
it was.
Yeah.
It was. Man, I love that moment when Lisa Kudrow was like, we took out this giant pole.
Yeah.
And I was like, they did. I
Yeah.
remember that. And then
Yeah.
like, I was like surprised it made it in because I was like, it was kind of like a little fuck you to like the people who rebuilt the set. They're like, the fuck
Yeah.
is this? No, we got
Yeah.
rid of this.
It was interesting. There was just like a lot going on there.
I guess my final thought on the Friends reunion is just that, like, I honestly did enjoy it for the most part.
Yeah.
And it makes me kind of want to rewatch some episodes of Friends for the first
I
time in a
know.
long time.
That makes me mad.
Like, I
but-
kind of want to see the episode with the pivot scene.
Yeah. Pivot.
Yeah.
So,
Pivot.
Hey man, the Friends pilot is great. I watched it a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
And it's
It slaps, as the kids say.
I think especially now that we've watched so many bad pilots, it's a really interesting show to watch because you're like, this is a good fucking pilot.
Yeah.
All right, why don't we check in with Mr. Producer for the pitch?
all right, let's dial him up.
I got an idea for you. A reunion show for Vinnie and Bobby.
You mean that show Matt LeBlanc did like 6 episodes of?
7, yeah.
I just don't.
Audiences are gonna love it. We'll rebuild the sets, we'll talk to some celebs about their favorite sexist moments, and we'll got like the whole cast on board.
It just seems like.
We got Bobby Torti. Oh, you should see how glorious his hair is now.
Okay,
We got little Joey Lauren Adams.
I like her.
America's sweetheart. We got Freddie Stoller.
I think he goes by Fred.
And get this, we even snagged an exclusive interview with John Panette.
Mr. Producer, John Panette passed away in 2014.
Yeah, but you remember that medium you hooked me up with.
Okay, so, I mean, it sounds like you might have something here.
Oh, it's gonna be a lot of fun. The kids will love it.
And Matt's on board?
Hmm?
Matt
Matt
LeBlanc.
LeBlanc. Well, funny thing about that, he seems to already be booked for some other reunion show for something else. I'm not sure. It's probably for episodes or, that show Friendlies.
Friends?
Till the end, Aaron. Till the end. Well, I guess that kicks off the premiere for season 2.
That was a show?
We're happy to be back.
And cut to credits.
Ba 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 da da.
That Was a Show is created and hosted by Brynn Burney, Andrew Barry Helmer, and myself, Aaron Yeager. It's a production of Radio Gizmo in Toronto, Canada. Subscribe, rate, review, and share. Follow us on Instagram and tell your friends about it. That Was a Show?
Radio Gizmo.